There are fresh calls for the decriminalisation of sex work since the discovery of 6 bodies in a warehouse in the Johannesburg CBD. Now, the women are believed to have been killed by a 21-year-old who is only facing 1 count of murder. Some of the women's colleagues say they reported their colleagues missing, but the police's handling of this particular matter also has come under scrutiny. Now, the subject of decriminalisation has been raging for decades now. But could we see it come to finality? Let's speak to John Jeffrey, who's the Deputy Minister of Justice and Constitutional Development. Deputy Minister, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Some activists, listening to them since news of the 6, women, of the death of these 6 women broke, some activists are coming out to say that this is linked to the issue of the decriminalisation of sex work, and it's been going on for too long. Some asking, what is taking government so long? How do you respond?
Good evening, Bongiwe. It's a complex issue and it's a divisive issue. So, from the perspective of government got a few years ago the Law Reform Commission to do a report to look at the issue of decriminalisation, whether there should be a decriminalisation, and the Law Reform Commission unfortunately felt that we should continue criminalising. We are actually, though, at the stage where we are preparing a bill for Cabinet, which will then go out for public comment on decriminalisation, because we do believe that there should be a decriminalisation, or at least some form of decriminalisation. And definitely the problem with criminalisation is that it means that sex workers do their work, engage with clients in shady places, because neither them nor their clients want to be seen. So we are hoping that we will have a bill out for public comment before the end of the year.
And one of the things that, you've also just touched on is how divisive this particular subject is, and we'll get to that in just a moment. But I wonder if this particular bill that you're preparing is also looking at another aspect that has been raised here, which is full decriminalisation, because other activists were arguing that you can decriminalise one aspect of it, but it could still be found that the clients are the ones that could then be criminalised here.
Yes, that's what's called the Swedish or the Scandinavian model, which is to decriminalize the selling of sex, but to keep the buying of sex criminalized. The problem with that approach, and it's particularly relevant in this case, is that a sex worker's client is still not going to want to come out of the shadows, and so is going to want to engage the sex worker in more dicey places, dicey for the sex worker's safety. So that's the problem with the partial decriminalisation. But there are proponents of it, strong proponents of it in South Africa. There's also proponents to continue criminalisation. But let me just say that de facto, I had asked the NPA for details of the prosecutions for breaking the Sexual Offences Act, the old one of 57, and which criminalized the selling of sex. The selling of sex, and the new one which criminalizes the buying of sex. And they don't, unfortunately, keep figures, but they didn't actually think there have been any prosecutions in the last few years for those offences. But it is something divisive. So effectively in South Africa, it's de facto really decriminalized. But until the laws are changed, sex workers are always going to have a problem reporting matters to the police and not being taken seriously. The issue of stigma, though, for sex workers and their clients will, though, continue. And that's something that society's got to work on.
And how do you begin to balance that then in this particular bill? Because some are raising a moral argument while others are raising, human rights issues here.
Yeah, morality. I mean, I've been in engagement with church leaders. I've had some church leaders say to me that raise a concern that decriminalisation is against God's law. But the response to that is that adultery is also against God's law, and adultery is in the Ten Commandments, and it's no longer criminalized in society. So we do have to move on and look at the impact on society as a whole.
And the South African Law Reform, Commission, in their report, they also say that in part that they believe that legalizing prostitution would increase the demand locally and internationally for more prostituted persons and would foster a culture that normalizes prostitution and sexual coercion. This is something that, others, of course, as you say, are standing fiercely, in support of, while others are standing fiercely against this. I wonder, how do you begin to address that? Because others in this particular context are also raising issues around human trafficking.
Yeah, I mean, the issue is being raised of won't it cause an increase in human trafficking? The Law Reform Commission felt that in the Netherlands that it had, although there are other views on that, other research that was done on that. The sex workers say that, well, currently, if somebody is working as a sex worker who has been trafficked, her colleagues can't go and report it to the police, because the police then may charge them for being a sex worker. So they argue that it would be easier, once it's decriminalization, to report victims of human trafficking who are being forced to sell sex. We are likely to look in the bill to tightening the net on particularly clients who buy sex from a victim of trafficking or buy sex from a child sex worker, because we're only talking about decriminalizing adult sex and not for children, which is a person under the age of 18.
And one of the things, also that would be critical, and I wonder then if the bill does address this, is something that you touched on earlier as well, which is around police conduct. Because even in this very case, it's there, and some of the sex workers are alleging that they had been reporting this for quite some time, and police were not dealing with their matters adequately when it comes to these missing persons reports that they had been filing. I wonder if there is a section that also deals with how law enforcement agencies must then begin to deal with some of the issues around sex work.
I don't know if those kinds of provisions need to be in legislation, because the police are meant to respond to complaints, cases that are opened, those kinds of things. Yes, in some places there have been problems with the police and their response to reports of gender-based violence. Those are things that the Minister of Police regularly speaks out against. So I think those issues are more for the police to deal with themselves and to ensure that they stop happening. That when people, even now, when sex work is still criminalized in the law, that when somebody comes to report a crime, a possible murder, a person who's disappeared, that they do take steps to investigate it. But it's difficult to comment without knowing the facts about what happened, but I think it obviously needs to be investigated, seeing the issues have been raised.
And just before I let you go, Deputy Minister, I mean, there's another issue, seeing Magistrate Desmond Naya appearing in court this week. Of course, I'm sure as the Justice Ministry, that is something that has been of concern. I mean, we've seen even the minister's statement in this particular regard as well.
Yeah, I mean, what one has to remember is that magistrates are like judges, judicial officers, and they are independent, and they need to be independent from the executive, from the Minister of Justice. So the disciplinary processes are run through the Magistrates Commission, which is a independent body. They have to investigate, they have to make recommendations to Parliament. This issue, though, has been before the Commission for some time. Mr. Naya was suspended, or the Commission requested Mr. Naya's suspension, I think it was back in 2020. So he's been suspended over that time, and they have then been conducting a disciplinary process into him. So he hasn't been sitting on his bench for some time, although it's a pity that the disciplinary matter couldn't have been finalized earlier.
All right, Deputy Minister, thank you so much for your time. Let's see then when that bill comes out and hopefully, speak more and see just how the progress is going to be on this one. Do appreciate your time this afternoon. That was John Jeffrey, Deputy Minister of Justice and Constitutional Development.